Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Do you have any bad habits? Why is it that sometimes we find ourselves repeating undesirable behaviors despite our best attempts to change? Well, in an age when our communication has been degraded to typing with our thumbs and screaming into silly smart devices, human relationships, it seems, are suddenly in jeopardy. So how can we turn down our anxiety, reprogram our brains, and work with our brain chemistry to create the positive changes we actually want in our lives? If you've ever been derailed by your inner monkey or dealt with existential angst, this show is for you. Returning to the podcast today is one of my favorite people to talk to, Loretta Breuning, PhD. She's a professor, best-selling author, host of the Happy Brain podcast, and founder of the Inner Mammal Institute. In today's show, Dr. Breuning is sharing critical insight into how we can rewire our brains and boost serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin levels. Before we get there, though, here's a review for the New York Times best-selling Wild Diet book that came in on Amazon. Vanessa says, 5 out of 5 stars, excellent and thorough, a comprehensive and enjoyable read that challenges conventional thinking. Abel made me reconsider my approach to food. I look forward to hearing more. Hey, Vanessa, thank you so much for that review. And for those of you out there who are, just dipping your toes into the show or maybe new to our content and channels, check out the Wild Diet book on Amazon. At this point, it's been out for, 6 years, I think, but it's a New York Times bestseller. A lot of people have it. If you do have it on your shelf, then pick it back up because there are a lot of recipes that I hope will be worth it for the rest of your life. But also, if you haven't checked out my book, Designer Babies Still Get Scabies, it's a collection of satire and poetry, and you can get that also on Amazon as an audiobook, as a physical book on paperback, as well as an ebook, and we often have giveaways. So if you'd like any of these books for free, we've given over 10,000 books and ebooks away every year for the past few years. Make sure you're signed up for our newsletter over at fatburningman.com. You can go to fatburningman.com/bonus as well to sign right up for the newsletter. And there are lots of exciting announcements coming out soon. Maybe you can tell a little bit. My background is changing if you're watching the video version, but lots of live streams, music performances, and more coming to you soon. As well, if you haven't checked out our new app, The Wild Challenge, you're totally missing out. You can go see that at fatburningman.com/app. We're going to be running new challenges this year every single month through our app with tracking capabilities, with all sorts of fun giveaways. And of course, those of you who have been involved in the challenge know that there's a lot of fun to be had. Pie baking contests, giveaways of future greens, collagen cocoa, making recipes together, and much, much more. You can check all of that out at fatburningman.com/app. You can also just email me, abel@fatburningman.com. Follow me on the socials. We're starting up a new Twitch channel. Much more to come. Also, if you're in the United States, one more quick plug. Please check out wildsuperfoods.com. One of our favorite products to take personally, especially recently when it's been really cold out, is Collagen Cocoa. I'll have that probably as a hot cocoa in a couple of hours. I'm still kind of doing a fast here and I've got my coffee, but Collagen Cocoa offers 21 grams of protein per serving, which is many multiples of the other proteins that you'll find out there. We really like the taste a lot. We've made brownies, hot cocoa, throw it into smoothies, into coffee, all sorts of different combinations. You can have fun with collagen cocoa as an ingredient. If you want to save a few bucks, you can sign up for Subscribe and Save, and that enters you into some of our challenges and communities, as well as a subscriber to Wild Superfoods. And you can also get 3-packs and 6-packs for big discounts. For us as little guys, as a small company, the more volume and scale that we get, the more people who buy from Wild Superfoods, the better we can be with our prices and the more products we can offer you. So if you'd like to support us and keep this show coming to you, please check out wildsuperfoods.com. Right now, only in the US, a little complicated international these days, but please check out wildsuperfoods.com. All right. Here's the show with Dr. Loretta Breuning. We're talking about how to work with your happy brain chemicals instead of against them, what to do about existential angst, all the rage these days. Simple tricks to retrain your brain to create new habits or skills. How to avoid reverting to bonds that were built by institutions. Making peace with your mammal brain with small daily contributions. And tons more. Let's go hang out with Dr. Breuning. Welcome back, folks. Returning to the show today is Loretta Breuning, PhD, professor, best-selling author of 8 books, host of the Happy Brain podcast, and founder of the Inner Mammal Institute. Dr. Breuning's books, podcasts, and resources share critical insight into how we can rewire our brain and boost serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphin levels. If you've ever been derailed by your inner monkey, this show is for you. Dr. Breuning, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, nice to be here.
So I was thinking that maybe we'll start with the one-up position, because we're seeing this playing out just in frightening ways all around us. So can you just start right there, explain what that is?
Sure. So the animal brain cares urgently about its social position. And it sounds crude and wrong. And so we will all, with our higher verbal brain, deny that we feel that way. But a whole century of research in the 20th century made it clear that mammals have social hierarchies, and they invest tremendous effort, and their emotions are attached to it because emotions are attached to survival, and the survival of your genes is what counts in the animal brain. And so when you have a higher social status, an animal gets more reproductive opportunity, and that triggers our happy chemicals, and the chemical is serotonin. And very briefly, it doesn't mean aggression. It means feeling pride and confidence in your own strength.
But we see the strength of others, especially now on social media, as a survival threat. Not a real one, but we see it that way. We process it that way.
Yes, exactly. And that's the complication, that to your animal brain, losing the one-up position is a survival threat in the way, if you've ever watched nature videos and there's another monkey who's getting in the way of your reproductive opportunity, and so your genes will be wiped off the face of the earth. So that's a big deal for the animal brain. And so we make a big deal out of like the most tiny threats to our status for that reason without consciously intending to.
And do you feel this way as well, that status has become more and more superficial as the years tick by?
No, I think life was always pretty crazy. People were always pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's just that we're not as aware of it. Or maybe when we're young, we have higher illusions about things. And then as you accumulate experience, you lose those illusions.
Interesting. What about how do mammals interact with screens? Because it's different from the way that we interact with paper or kind of each other, right? Yet, especially these days, we have more screen time than ever, and kind of virtual relationships instead of what historically for mammals we would have had, these interpersonal relationships that were up close, whether we liked it or not.
So all of the good that we have in us, we can bring to the screen, and all of the bad we have in us, we can bring to the screen. And then how we evaluate that, we can remember the good or we can remember the bad. So for example, the positive is that many people are using new technology to connect on a deeper level. So for example, the people in my real physical life don't want to hear me lecture them about their serotonin.
But I'll listen all day from the middle of nowhere in Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the good side of it. But then the bad side of it, it sort of creates unrealistic expectations that people now have of everybody should understand me all the time. And if you don't agree with me, then you're rejecting me and you're excluding me. So I think it's a lack of maturity that has been inculcated by, we all blame our own things. So I blame academic psychology because I spent so much of my life in academia that I see that there's this sort of appeal to the child brain that is giving people unrealistic expectations.
Can you dig a little deeper there?
Sure. Can you be more specific of which the academic part, the child part?
Yeah, the
Or
child
both?
part.
Yeah, okay. So the child's view is I must get my needs met, and I will die if other people don't meet my needs. So we're born into the world with like, I'm hungry, but a child doesn't know it's hunger. Their blood sugar falls and they have a sense of desperation. And that sense of desperation enables us to cry, which is our only inborn survival skill. And when you cry, your needs get met. So that's all the healthy source of development. But a brain is wired from early experience. So that feeling of, if my needs don't get met by other people, I will die. It's not a realistic expectation, but it is where we all start in life. So it's our challenge, each of us, to build and elaborate more realistic expectations about taking action to get our needs met. But academic psychology and therapeutic psychology and political psychology have tended to give people the expectation that you should just be able to sit there and be happy all the time. And if you don't, it's the world's fault for failing to meet your needs. It's the teacher's fault for failing to meet your needs, etc. And once you have people telling you this, then you're even less likely to take the action that builds the skill to meet your needs.
It's the teacher's fault that I got a bad grade.
Yeah. You can see I'm biased because I was a teacher for 25 years
Sure.
and I was a parent. So this is the example that's most immediate to me.
Yeah. But you do see that play out all over the place right now, especially social media. And the reason I ask about the superficial piece is because, a lot of our communication has been degraded to typing on our thumbs on Twitter, screaming at each other in these little echo chambers. And so you see human relationships being degraded and broken apart when, if we were closer together or had this, or at least a deeper conversation, a longer form conversation, that never would have happened.
Yes. So the reason for this is the herd aspect of the mammal brain. And that's a different chemical, oxytocin. So oxytocin makes you feel good when you have social trust and social support. And in reality, it's hard to get that because my brain cares about my survival and you care about your survival. So I can get all indignant and expect you to focus on my needs and put my priorities first and then be all outraged when you don't. And so I can create a virtual herd where I have the illusion that everybody is on my side. And then we can all gang up on anybody who doesn't agree with us. And the reason this happens is because in the animal world, animals bond when they have a common enemy. When they don't have a predator, they like to spread out because getting close together means that the other guy is peeing on your food and trampling on your food and getting their horns in your face when you try to eat. But when you distance out, a predator will eat you in a second. So we've inherited a brain that fears spreading out and seeks that herd protection. And that's what social media has enabled people to have, that fast, easy shortcut to the difficult project of creating mutual, sustainable social trust.
That's so interesting, though, because in real life, if it were physical, 3D life, putting together a herd is a lot of work. On social media, 3 seconds, you've got thousands of people retweeting something.
Yes, exactly. And in real life, it's so hard to have a herd that we really need to have one-to-one bonds where I create trust with someone who reciprocates with me. And if you get out of the habit of doing that, then many people are afraid of doing that. And I use the example as a mother of like, my children's generation grew up having their parents make play dates for them. And it sounds crude, but that risk that difficulty of building one-to-one bonds. If you don't have practice, it seems so hard that you revert easily to these bonds that are built by some institution that doesn't necessarily have your well-being at heart.
Yeah, so with more people kind of relying on institutions and companies to manage their friend relationships or their virtual friend relationships, how does that play out?
Well, so then if you say anything that gets you the bad will of the herd, it feels like total devastation to your mammal brain. And if you don't have the inner skill to build the bonds individually, then you're dependent and then you will go along with anything the herd does.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the things that are rewarded online are really the egregious, insane, edgy, the edgier the better, tabloid, lowest common denominator stuff, or just the things that are kind of there to bring outrage because outrage is an easy way to get engagement and attention. Hence all of the relationships being destroyed.
Yeah. And from the chemical perspective, so outrage makes people more aware of the common enemy, which bonds them closer together because animals are very aware of their internal conflict unless they're focused on an enemy. So you often hear about like the alpha monkey, but the alpha monkey is always fighting with rivals. But as soon as a predator comes, the alpha and the beta bond together. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the serotonin. I want to be in the one-up position. And the more I enrage my followers, if you're taking that strategy, the more you get the esteem and the respect of your herd if that's the name of the game with them.
Interesting. So that's kind of an alpha behavior.
Well, it's a behavior that everyone uses to try to raise their status. In my work, I try not to use the term alpha because it's my fault I used it. But it stigmatizes so that you could say, oh, that guy's an alpha and he does that. But really, everyone does it.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot more sense. What else about for me, just the physical aspect of people spending so much time on devices now with their head cranked down, walking around in that position. Does that have an effect on our mental health as well, just from a physical standpoint? I'm thinking back to some of the studies I read in college where if you hold the pencil in your mouth and you're smiling, you're in a different mental state than if you hold it and your mouth is kind of pursed.
I know what you're saying. I'm a little bit suspicious of these studies. You may have heard that most of them are not reproducible when they
Sure.
try to,
Right.
So I try to go to deeper roots of mental health rather than the quick faking it by faking a smile with a pencil in your mouth. But I know you're just using that as an example. But this is the way I try to look at it. So I spent many of my formative years in Manhattan where I would sit on a subway train, reading a book. And not everybody on the subway reads a book, but many people read the newspaper. When you got off the train, there were newspapers everywhere. So people always read. And now having a device makes it easier to read, makes me easier to be in the middle of a few books at the same time. And then I can go further from the office because if anybody needs me, I can be into. So there's definite benefits of this. And so people are only focusing on the negatives. So I'm hoping that more people are reading and more people are venturing further out because they have they don't need to be that connected physically because they know that you can always stay in connection. So needless to say that then there's still the cheap way. For example, people who only watch trash TV maybe are doing the equivalent of that on their phone. So we're all making the choice to use our devices in the way we're choosing. And if you blame the device, that's like blaming the teacher, blaming the system, blaming your parents. So we all need to take responsibility for our own brain. And that starts with understanding how it works. And we're not really getting a good picture of how that works from from a lot of what's being said today because it's all based on this blame model. And when you eat bad food, to blame the company that made the bad food. I'm sure you've covered that one in your.
Yeah, of course. The thing that I think offends me, or where I put some blame on those types of companies, is when they essentially hijack conscious behaviors, where of course, yes, we can all get addicted to drinking soda or something like that. But one thing that I read in your book that stuck out to me was we have a tendency to search for a threat. We want to, I know I wake up and I want to know what the threat is. What is the thing that I can rally against, fight against? And that sort of thing is hijacked in a world where, the information is not necessarily all that reliable, or, you only get one half of the conversation on certain platforms or that sort of thing. So anyway, how can you manage these natural tendencies that we all have, like looking for a threat, but finding a real one, or maybe turning down the threat level in your own brain a little bit?
Yeah, I'll give you some good examples of how strong is this tendency to look for a threat so that people can find it in themselves. So the first thing I often find that when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that comes to my mind before I'm even awake is like the worst thing that happened yesterday. And it wasn't even necessarily something that happened, but that concern, like maybe so and so is mad at me. And then I wake up thinking, what if so-and-so is mad at me when I've just made that up?
Yeah.
So that's where your mind goes. And that's the topic of another one of my books called The Science of Positivity. If you don't have that, I'll send it to you.
I don't have that one yet.
Okay, you'll love it. You could tell me what format you wanted it and I'll send it. So the other example, when I give a talk, I noticed that my eyes would settle on a person in the audience with a grimace on their face. Like, that's crazy. I know that you're supposed to look at the audience, but then I'd always go back to the person who was scowling. And it's like I was creating in my mind a scowling universe just by habit. Like, it's insane. And if I don't know that I'm doing that myself, then I literally believe that the world is hating me, that everybody hates me, that it's unfair because they think this and they think that. So we're all creating that in our minds already. Now, you could say that others are taking advantage of that, whether it's the person who's creating the platform or whatever. But the more you look at human history, the more you see that people have always done this. And also, if you put your devices away, and I don't listen to the media at all, like zero. But anytime I'm with people, I hear them yakking about their victimhood. So this is how people bond. And it's frustrating. And so we each get to decide how to divide our time. It's all we can do.
What about existential angst? I love this line. We don't know what will kill us, so we never know if we're safe.
Yes. And something will kill us. That's the thing.
Right.
So we're all not safe because something will kill us. And because we don't know what will kill us, instead of just looking out for that one thing, you got to look out for anything. So you may know somebody who says, well, my father died of this and my grandfather died of that, so I think I'll probably die of that. So they're focused on that threat, but then you may have a different theory and you're focused on some other threat. So, but then somebody else is focused on everything, So how can we deal with this constant sense of threat? And it's interesting to know that animals are not aware of their own mortality, but humans are, because we understand abstractions, and the future is an abstraction. So we know that we're not going to be here forever and something will get us. So how can we stop ourselves from obsessing over that? And the answer is to go back and give your mammal brain what it wants. So your mammal brain wants immortality. And the way animals get this is by obsessing over reproduction. Now, you may not think that animals obsess over reproduction, but if you watch nature videos or read any evolutionary biology textbook, you'll get or fun book, you'll get it. So then how can we don't want to obsess over reproduction, so we use the word legacy. How can I create something that will be here when I'm gone? So I use the simple example that if you're a carpenter and you make a good solid chair, it will last longer than you last. So anything you create that will last leaves that existential angst. And if you focus on that, then you won't contribute to all the craziness, but you can't fix everybody else.
So that puts the responsibility on you, though, to do the work and create something.
It sure does. Well, yeah, but to take the steps to create. Now, you don't have to be a famous artist or a famous anything. It's this taking the action that gives you the pleasure. And the simple explanation of that is that most of like the great artists or whatever that we appreciate today were not appreciated while they were alive. So if you wait for somebody to applaud your creation, you're not going to get it. So you have to give that to yourself.
What about, I love this line too, you just have so many throughout your books, but you got wired by your past pain. You may not remember it because it doesn't require conscious memory to work.
Yes. So this wiring is a real physical connections between neurons. And the more urgent the information, whether it's something bad or something good, you get more chemicals. And those chemicals are like paving on your neural pathways. So all the super bad things and all the super good things that happened to me when I was young built the super highways of my brain. So you're not conscious of it because the wiring came from the chemicals, which is the animal brain, and your verbal brain has no insider information about your animal brain. And your animal brain works without words because animals don't have words. So it's those chemical reactions that pave our pathways, and we're not consciously aware of them. And we go into those pathways because they're so efficient, just because they've been used so often.
And so that's one of the reasons that you have these critical learning periods, whether it's for language or other aspects, because your brain is operating in a different way. What is it before usually age 6 or 7 or so? And then again, it reactivated in puberty, right?
Yes. So it's always activated, but what I focus on is there is a chemical called myelin, and this is what coats neurons the way insulation coats a wire. And that makes the neuron up to 100 times faster at conducting electricity. So everything you do with your myelinated neurons feels natural and normal and true. And a simple example is when I speak my native language and I look for a word, it comes to me so easily that I'm not even aware that I had to learn the language. But when you're with a baby or child, you see, like it takes time to learn language. And so if I study a foreign language and I have to look for that word, it's because the pathway is not myelinated. And we all know that it's possible to learn a foreign language, but it takes so much repetition to connect neurons intentionally in adulthood that most people don't do it, even though we can.
So how do you build those connections in adulthood if you want to and you're willing to put in the work?
So the simple answer is repetition. And it takes a lot of repetition. And I use the term 45 days, and people debate how many days, and I don't care about the particular number. But because it takes so much repetition, you need to zero in on one behavior at a time or one thought pattern at a time that you want to rewire. And then, because it often feels bad at first, look for a way to make it fun. Find a way to make it feel good.
What's an example of that, making it fun?
Sure. Do you want to give me any examples of like something you'd like to rewire or a listener might like to rewire?
Yeah, maybe. Well, for example, there are some people, including myself, who played a lot of sports when we were young. It feels natural to me. So people who have been overweight or didn't play sports in high school and that sort of thing are trying to come at health sometimes and fitness later in life without those inbuilt, kind of physical skills.
Okay, great. So I walk every day, and I didn't exercise much when I was young, and I have scoliosis, and so it's not really fun for me. So I listen to an audiobook, and while I'm walking, and when I listen to a book I love, like it goes like nothing, and I can't wait to go back to it. When I'm in the middle of a book that I hate, it feels like work, and sometimes I just give up on a book and go to a book that I like better. So that would be an example of a way to make it fun. And then I also, for like healthy eating. So you mentioned like you couldn't imagine not having a certain treat. So I learned to make healthy cookies. I learned to freeze the cookies as soon as I make them and only have one out a day. And I learned to not eat all the cookie dough while I'm cooking. So there's all these ways that you can create a healthy habit and make it fun.
Is there a way, there are kind of different types of people, some who can moderate and others who are more likely to binge. Are we wired differently? Can you help reverse that in yourself if it's a problem you struggle with?
I know what you're saying. This is why I have a problem with a lot of the psychology that's out there, is because when people say, I'm wired differently, it's harder for me, I have a special brain that likes to binge. No, every brain likes to binge. So we all are tempted to do it. So we all have to create habits. But maybe you have trouble restraining yourself with X, and I have trouble restraining myself with Y. And we can often find how that's linked to our past. Now, the simple answer is still that we can always build an alternative habit. So I'll give you two simple examples. So one of them, when I was a kid, a lot of kids would bring a dime to school to buy potato chips. It was 10 cents then. It's probably 5 cents when I was in elementary school. And my parents never had the money. So I never brought a dime to school. I brought my bologna sandwich and on white bread in those days. And then I never had the potato chips after it. And today, if I buy potato chips, I'm going to eat the whole bag. So I was like, I'm not going to have them around the house.
Yeah.
Then I actually learned to eat like half the bag, but still, so I just learned to not buy them. But somebody told me this, like so here's another example. When I cook something that is great and I put the time and effort to assemble these great ingredients, and I've been looking forward to making this, and, with the time you put into it, when I eat that first dish of it, it goes in a second, like so fast that you don't even notice. So this is the experience I think that most people have, that when you have that thing that you really want, it goes so fast that it's done. And all you could think of is, I want the next one. So this is what we have to understand our brain. So first, it's dopamine that got you to want that thing. And to say to yourself, it's not the pizza or the ribs or whatever it was. It's the dopamine that made it feel good. And then as soon as you eat it, the dopamine's gone. So you want more dopamine. So all my books are about how to understand dopamine and how to get that excitement in other ways, because when you're getting it from food, you don't even know that it's dopamine that you really want rather than the food. So that's one thing. And then there's this other thing about you probably know this, you get a tiny dish, you eat the one dish, and you say, after I've eaten that one dish, I know that it's not really hunger, but I know that it takes 20 minutes for the full feeling, the satiation, to reach my brain and my bloodstream. So I am not going to eat anything after that one little dish. I'm going to have a big glass of water, wait a half hour, and if I'm still hungry, I can have more. But probably I won't still be hungry because it's not real hunger.
Yeah, and I imagine that a lot of, well, it does seem that a lot of people are unfamiliar with true hunger, not boredom, right? But like actual hunger. Are there any other insights from the animal world, and mammals, which in the wild at least aren't typically overweight? You look at Americans especially, and 80-90% of us are at this point. What else can we learn from mammals?
Sure. So first, animals are not overweight because it takes so much work for them to get food that they don't bother unless they're actually hungry. Now, this is being falsely represented now in the academic world, where they're representing the state of nature as easy and effortless, and capitalism ruined everything and made our lives so hard. But it's not. They had to work, and the work is partly getting the food, and it's partly chewing and digesting it because they don't have access to dense calorie food. So that's the first whole thing. Second whole thing is our brains evolved to seek constantly because our ancestors didn't have supermarkets or refrigerators. They had to constantly seek food. And imagine if you're starving to death and you don't even have the energy to seek food, then you would die. So natural selection built a brain that rewards you with dopamine when you seek. So it's the whole seeking system that we're designed to look, I'm always looking for something new. Now, imagine that your ancestors, they found a lot of one food. Let's say they found a lot of fruit. But if they're just eating fruit every day, that's not meeting their needs. So once they have enough fruit, then they look for fish or meat. So your brain is always focused on the unmet need. So that's what it takes to feel good, is to focus on the unmet need. And because our needs are met so easily, we don't have to look for firewood. We don't have to look for water. We just sit in our butts and expect good feelings to come to us. It's just unrealistic expectations. And that's the topic of that book, The Science of Positivity.
So the pleasure, or at least the dopamine to some degree, is really in looking for the house or your next car. It's not the actual thing.
Yes, and if you get the house or the next car, then that's going to stop feeling good too.
Mm-hmm.
And then, or if you don't want to do the work that it takes to get the house or the car, then you criticize other people who are looking for houses and cars. See, I live in California, so that's the topic of conversation, is just hating other people's houses and cars. So we all have the luxury today of good information. We can all be real about our own brain, and we can all find healthy ways to seek instead of just criticizing other people's unhealthy ways to seek.
And waiting for the system to bring you all the answers and all the solutions.
Yeah.
There's another humdinger of a line. The system cannot make you happy. The act of meeting your own needs is what stimulates happy chemicals.
Yeah. Are all these lines from Tame Your Anxiety?
Nope, that one was from Revolt.
Wow, good. Okay. But the other ones were from Tame Your Anxiety?
Yes, yeah. I
Okay,
believe so.
great. Oh, good. Okay.
It's hard to keep all your books straight. I've read a few over the years. They're all, I mean, every single one that I've read is excellent. I highly, everyone who is listening out there, check out Loretta's work. I mean it.
Thank you. InnerMammalInstitute.org. So if I remember correctly about the quote you just said, you're waiting for the system to meet your needs, and then what?
It's the act of meeting your own needs that stimulates the happy chemicals in your own brain.
Yes, exactly. So if you're waiting for the system to meet your needs, even if the system did meet your needs, it still wouldn't make you happy. But then you wouldn't know that because you've been trained to believe that you're unhappy because the system has failed you. So then you don't know why you're unhappy. So you think, oh, the system must have failed me. So then you find more and more resentment and bitterness toward the system. And you can find other people who see it that way. And that gives you social bonding, which is oxytocin. but you still end up being bitter and unhappy and without dopamine.
But it seems like there's a bit of danger in that because we're all susceptible to kind of getting into that loop, getting caught into the herd, and then these herds can be herded in one direction or another, by kind of puppeteers in some cases. And we've seen this play out over history many times.
Yes, yes, yes. It's very sad. The history I have personally, like I study history at night when I want to relax, when I want to not think about things that are like too close to home. And so one thing just blows my mind. So I've been reading about the Elizabethan period. And so Protestants and Catholics killed each other for centuries. And then in England, once the Protestants won, then they started killing each other.
Right.
Okay. So then once that calmed down is because then atheists and Protestants started fighting each other, So it's people are insane. And the best we can do is focus on our own sanity and then have sane interactions with others. So this is the thing is I can't control other people, but I can make sure that every interaction I have that I'm trying to stick to my beliefs of what is a sane interaction rather than just merging with something that I think is not sane.
So people who constantly create the drama in their lives, is that kind of like waking up, searching for the threat? It's not quite there. So you want social significance, so you invent it and project it, or how does that work?
It does not work in your verbal brain. So, of course, these people are not consciously knowing that I'm just creating drama to feel powerful. But the reality is that it works, that you do get power by creating drama. And the way people do it is however it worked when you were young. So this is the myelinated pathway, that when you were young, if people gave you attention when you did this thing, then that's what you want to do today. So for one person, it's athletics. For another person, it's being weak and sick. And for another person, it's being angry. For another person, it's being too nice. So every one of us can look at like, what is that pathway that got created when we were young? And then you don't have to get angry about it, but just to say that I have billions of extra neurons in my brain just waiting for me to create new reactions to the world.
What are some other examples of kind of the victim mentality that might not be so obvious to other people?
Well, there are so many endless ones. What I said in the book is you can think of 10 of them in 10 seconds. But I'll use a great one that comes to mind is when a person drinks excessively and says, it's not my fault that I drink because, and then you could think of 10 answers to that question in 10 seconds. I drink because you make me drink. I drink because society encourages drinking, so you can all see how this works. And if you think that, you can find evidence. And that's what's so amazing about our brain is that our two brains work together. So your verbal brain is trying to give your mammal brain what it wants in order to feel safe. So the addict is saying, I need to feel powerful to feel safe. And if I think of myself as a hopeless addict, that doesn't feel powerful. But if I say that it's your fault that I'm drinking, then I feel more powerful. So then it finds evidence that it's your fault or society's fault that I'm drinking. So the way to solve this, needless to say, is your verbal brain has to repeat for many days in a row another way to feel powerful. And then I can feel strong and confident without drinking.
What are some good examples of that or ways to feel powerful in your own life? Because oftentimes, people talk about these things, but it's more a matter of doing them, right?
Yes, exactly. And obviously, there's no easy way to feel powerful because you live in a world with 7 billion other people who are trying to feel powerful.
Right.
So it it always starts with realistic expectations. And I always use the example of imagine you're a big movie star in Hollywood and you may think, "Oh, this person feels so powerful, they feel good all the time." But the reality is that they're not happy. They're constantly worried that some young new star is coming along and replacing them, and everybody's going to forget about them. And they're always getting in a fight with their director or with their agent to feel powerful. So being big does not make you happy because it's never enough for your mammal brain. It only wants to feel bigger and bigger. So understanding your mammal brain, making peace with it, and then finding ways to feel big with small things. So enjoy your little contributions. Enjoy one small contribution before lunch and another small contribution before dinner.
And I think because there's so much visibility of all these strangers, these 7 billion strangers all around the world, even for myself, as a musician, if I haven't really practiced it and like put it together, I don't want to release it yet. If we dial back a few years, before radios and before all this entertainment, almost everyone in the family, had some sort of little show they'd put on or they'd play piano. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about just kind of sharing that experience together. How can we bring that back?
Yeah, well, it's we don't want to idealize the olden days too much. So when I'm thinking of your ancestors immigrated to Colorado, when it got dark at night, there was nothing to do. They had to light candles and go to sleep with the animals and wake up early and worry about starving to death. And I don't really know if your ancestors lived in Colorado, but
New
let's just
Hampshire,
say
actually.
New Hampshire. Oh, that's even worse, right?
Even worse.
And mine were in Sicily. That was even worse. um, so it was dark at night, and they would hear noises, and they couldn't call 911. So what did they do? They played the piano. They played the fiddle. They sang. Now, what would happen if they sat around and criticized each other's? Like if I laugh at your piano playing and you laugh at my singing, then we're stuck in this cabin with each other. So maybe for that evening, they'll tolerate each other's bad music and laugh at the bad music at somebody else's cabin.
Yep.
But then when they go to somebody else's cabin, they may gossip about how crappy your guitar playing is, maybe, right?
Totally.
So our ancestors, they still wanted to feel important. So they did stupid things to feel important. And a great example of that, when my husband and I watch history movies, you can't believe, how you see them lined up like two rows of men, either with guns or swords or knives, and the two rows of guys just run at each other and kill each other until most of them are dead.
Yeah.
Like, this was insane. And I asked myself, how did they recruit people who were willing to do that? And I just think it's because they were sitting alone in their cabin playing piano with grandma, bored,
Yeah.
and they had no other way to feel powerful. So they allowed themselves to be indoctrinated that this was going to feel good.
How do you know if you are being indoctrinated?
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't gotten that yet. And oh man,
Not that would ever happen.
Well, many of our loved ones may be indoctrinated, and we can't say that to them. So this is a question I struggle with every day. I may have to get back to you on this. So I'll separate it into two questions because I'm always telling you to take responsibility for your brain. So how can you know if you're indoctrinated yourself versus how can you know if someone else is indoctrinated? Oh, you love to say, oh, they're indoctrinated. But if you tell them, they don't want to have anything to do with you. It's like telling someone they're in a cult, right? So let's start with taking responsibility for your own brain. So I wrote a book about how I decided that I was indoctrinated. So that book is called How I Escaped Political Correctness, and You Can Too. I'll send you that one too.
Yes,
Okay.
please. I love that title.
Thank you. So I discovered about 25 years ago, was it that long ago? Oh my God. 25 years ago, I realized in one split second how indoctrinated I was, because I was giving a lecture to a classroom of 150 students, and a student asked a question, and I knew that if I gave a truthful answer to that question, that I would say something politically incorrect. So I was just about to lie, to actually say a lie in front of 150 students in order to protect myself from political incorrectness. And then I was like, whoa, what am I doing? And I recognized that it was fear, that my fear of political incorrectness was like stronger than my desire for truth and authenticity. So I sort of, I sort of muffled and mumbled and ended the lecture. And then I had to do a lot of soul searching. And basically, I had been so indoctrinated that if you don't agree with the academic perspective, that then you're an enemy. And I didn't want to be an enemy because I grew up with a mother who was like, in this enemy thing. So I was indoctrinated to fear being one of the enemies. And then it took me 10 years to say, you know what, if you want to call me an enemy, go for it. I don't care. I care more about the integrity of my own thought process and having my own truth. So I got that far, but then I can't necessarily, if you say this to other people, that there are consequences. And so every individual has to decide what consequences they can manage. So in my case, I'm retired. I can't be fired. So I have, a retirement account. So I have a little bit more freedom. So that's why I'm not criticizing other people. But for example, I want to see my grandchildren. If I say things that are politically incorrect to my children, they could cut me off from my grandchildren. So that's why I have a grandchild who's 5 weeks old. So now that has doubled my number of generations. So you can see this is such a big deal to me.
Yeah, so it is important and perfectly natural to at some point bite your tongue, and that can be a political decision, but it doesn't have to be a negative one.
You mean that I can feel comfortable about it?
Yeah, for me, especially doing this online thing for 10 years, the hate that comes, the paid trolls when I have certain words, the censorship, all this stuff, it's like the self-censorship has been all over the place and really oppressive sometimes, to be perfectly honest. But if you learn how to manage it and know that sometimes not saying something is useful and keeping that opinion to yourself is okay. Like, there is definitely such thing as oversharing. And with all this speech, I'm a big fan of free speech and free expression, but you have to have the responsibility part too. And you have to have the ability also to bite your tongue sometimes.
Yes, exactly. And exactly, to feel okay about biting your tongue and not to feel like you have to say everything you think. And to remember that in the past, people didn't communicate in such a broad way. They communicated in smaller circles. And a lot of people have nothing else to do with their time but finding ways to find something wrong in what you said, and they can get rewarded by that. So there are very practical reasons to choose our words carefully. But another thing that, again, as a retired person, I have the luxury of is I don't read the comments, especially if I get a bad comment. I don't even, why should I give it airspace?
Yeah. It's, for me, it's going in sometimes, it's like sparring. Sometimes I feel like I need to stay sharp or whatever. But yes, there's definitely...
If you enjoy it, great. That's the thing. If you enjoy it, great.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I think it's important to try to evolve, especially as this landscape changes all around us. It's important not to stay too fixed, because I can be anti-technology, but also totally pro-technology. And it's nice to be able to wiggle in between as appropriate and kind of give yourself that luxury of not always being in a fixed identity-based position in your life.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll give you some great examples. When the train was invented, people said, the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket. The train is going to ruin life. It's going to ruin our minds because going at that fast of a speed is going to ruin us. And then when the bicycle was invented, people said the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket because that allowed everybody to go off and not to be home by dinner time and to have dinner with other families rather than their own. So every new technology has had a bad reaction.
That's really important context. I can't believe it. We could talk all day, but Loretta, what is the best place to find your work, your books, and what are you working on next?
InnerMammalInstitute.org, InnerMammalInstitute.org. And I wrote a new book during 2020 called Status Games, Why We Play and How to Stop. It'll be out next spring, and I will send you the PDF right now.
Thank you. I've already read, like I said, a bunch of your books, and I can't wait to read the rest of them. I mean that. Everyone else out there, please explore Loretta's work. It's so different, I feel comfortable saying, from pretty much anything else I've read. In the many years, the hundreds of interviews and many, many stacks of books, it's a true pleasure to come across your work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you getting it.
Hey folks, this is Abel James, New York Times bestselling author and host of the Fat Burning Man Show. And I've got a quick video here today about our brand spanking new product from our family company, Wild Superfoods. This one is called Collagen Cocoa, and we have been working on this for years. We're so excited because it tastes so good. So what it is, it's grass-fed bone broth protein. It's a protein concentrate that comes from bone broth from these cows that were raised as nature intended, eating grass on pasture. And it's combined with a high quality source of chocolate and cocoa powder and a little bit of stevia as a sweetener. So it actually tastes quite similar to cocoa powder combined with a little bit of a sweetener. It's got a wonderful taste. But we also have been using it. Allison is, as you probably know, if you're a longtime listener or follower, she's wonderful in the kitchen and comes up with the most dastardly and delicious things. So you can actually use collagen cocoa as a replacement for, as a swap for chocolate powder or cocoa powder in some of our recipes and some of our cookbooks and that sort of thing. So we've already made cookies, power cookies, brownies, and other things like that. But also collagen cocoa, you can just mix it in water. You can throw it in your favorite smoothie if you like chocolate, especially. It's a wonderful flavor. And then one of the other things that I do as a little kind of like health nut sundae is what I refer to it as, is I take Greek yogurt, usually full fat, grass-fed as well, and throw a scoop or two of this collagen cocoa in there with some nuts, maybe some fresh fruit, and oh my goodness, is that a wonderful treat. It's so delicious, and it gives it a really wonderful consistency, more like a mousse or like a pudding of some kind. So you can really have a lot of fun with this, or you can just use it, after your workout as a convenient way to get concentrated protein. And so in one serving, you're getting 21 grams of high quality animal source protein, which is more easily absorbed than a lot of the alternative protein sources out there that are plant-based and more highly processed. So we are very excited about collagen cocoa. When you get this, it's a giant, heavy, full thing of powder. So look forward to many delicious meals and treats as well. If you're interested in Wild Superfoods, you can check all this out at wildsuperfoods.com. And once again, this is Collagen Cocoa. So I'm Abel James signing off. Thanks for getting in touch. Thanks for your support. And I can't wait to hear how you like Collagen Cocoa. All right, we'll be in touch. Hey, it's Abel one last time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of Fat Burning Man. Before you go, please smash that like button, hit subscribe, or even leave us a quick review. It helps so much more than you even realize. And if you can think of someone else who you care about, friend, family member, anyone else who might appreciate this free show, then please take a quick second just to share it with them. Word of mouth is really the way that we've grown this show over the years. We have more than, at this point, 4 awards in independent media, 50 million downloads. We couldn't do any of this without you, so we really appreciate it. If you'd like to get in touch with me, then please follow me under Abel James or Fat Burning Man on your social media platform of choice, and I'll do my best to get right back to you. Now, if you want to keep this show coming to you, you can do something really quickly here. My wife Allison and I, along with a very small team, depend on listeners like you to make this show happen week after week. To join our next challenge coaching group or get in touch with me one-on-one, visit fatburningman.com. We also make group coaching free with your subscribe and save orders from our family company, Wild Superfoods, which you can find at wildsuperfoods.com. And if you'd like, you can throw a few bucks into the tip jar as a one-time donation or become a contributing member of our group on Patreon. Just look up Abel James on Patreon and you can join in the fun for as little as a few bucks and get my international best-selling book and audiobook as a special thanks. You can also find that page at fatburningman.com/tipjar. Now, a quick disclaimer for all those legal eagles out there. The Fat Burning Man Show provides general information and discussions about health and related subjects. The information provided in this show or in any related materials are not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions and views expressed on this show have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution, including corporate overlords. We don't have any of those. If you or any other person has a medical concern, I wholeheartedly encourage you to consult with your healthcare provider. Whew, okay. Don't forget to join our newsletter over at fatburningman.com. When you sign up for our email, I'll even send you a wild quick start guide along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes, even Allison's famous chocolate cookies, as a special thanks for signing up. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening and have a great week.